A federal judge has declared that a president of the United States, Donald Trump in this case, has violated the Posse Comitatus Act in place since 1878 to protect the American people from an out-of-control president who's trying to use the force of the U.S. military and military troops on civilian domestic soil and against Americans. And this judge, Judge Breyer, sits in San Francisco, the brother of a Supreme Court Justice, Stephen Breyer. He is not shy. And he has said out loud that the president has, through his actions of trying to take over California's National Guard, but by extension, using that National Guard, using the Marines against Americans for domestic law enforcement purposes, is not only a violation of the Posse Comitatus Act, but he says in the first 2 pages of his order that what he's observing is a president that has decided to create illegally, unconstitutionally, a federal police force to take over and use at his command and take over, obviously, blue cities and blue states. I'm Michael Popok. You're on the Midas Touch Network, hopefully where you go for breaking news stories like this at the intersection of law and politics. Let's get down to the 52-page decision coming off a 3-day non-jury trial last month. We were waiting for this decision. We thought it went poorly for the government, for the Department of Justice's position. And this is the first time in American history that a federal judge has declared such a violation. But more to the point, let me read to you from Judge Breyer's decision. He said on page 1 over to page 2, this actually starts his decision. Congress spoke clearly in 1878 when it passed the Posse Comitatus Act, prohibiting the use of the U.S. military to execute domestic law. That means you can't turn the barrels of the tanks against Americans on domestic soil. Nearly 140 years later, defendants, President Trump, Secretary of Defense Hegseth, and the Department of Defense deployed the National Guard and Marines to Los Angeles, ostensibly to quell a rebellion and ensure that federal immigration law was enforced. There were indeed protests in Los Angeles, says the judge, and some individuals engaged in violence. Yet there was no rebellion, nor was civilian law enforcement unable to respond to the protest and enforce the law. Nevertheless, at defendants' orders and contrary to Congress's explicit instruction, federal troops executed the laws. The evidence at trial established the defendants systematically used armed soldiers whose identity was often obscured by protective armor and military vehicles to set up